Let's now talk about the keyword static. What does static do? So remember that these variables, whatever we define here, and these methods, they are all instance methods and instance variables, which means that you cannot access any of them without creating an instance first. You have to first create an object, which is an instance of the MathUtils class, and only that object, only that instance will be able to access the variables here or the methods here, which means they're all instance variables and instance methods. So I'll write it down. So now you understand that only instances of MathUtils class will be able to access the instance variables and the instance methods. However, there can be a class level variable or a class level method. What does that mean? Let's actually define another variable, which will be static. We can define it in this way. Remember that static does not necessarily have to replace public or protected. Static methods or static variables can be public, they can be protected like this, or they can be private like this. It doesn't matter. But as long as they're static, it means that they're not variables that instances can access. They're not instance variables. They are class level variables. So I'll change this to public. So this is a class level variable because it's static. Let's create a class level method. We'll say public static. Let's say it doesn't return anything, and let's just name it the static method. It could be any method. It doesn't matter as long as it's static. And we're doing this for the example purposes, right? So let's say it just prints out something random. Let's say it literally prints out something random. Anyway, this means since this is static, this means that this is a class level method. What does that really mean? Again, I'll repeat. If you had to access this variable, or if you had to access any of these methods, you first had to create an instance of the MathUtils class. You had to instantiate an object of the MathUtils class, correct? But for the static methods, you do not need to create an object. The class can directly access this. So we're only talking about static methods right now, all right? So just static methods can be accessed by the class directly. What does that mean? Let's go to the main class. Here we have the mu instance of MathUtils, right? Let's see if mu can access this method named the static method, or let's see if it can access any static variable. Let's see if it can access any one of these two things. So let's go back to main. Here we'll write mu dot, and you see we cannot find the static method or the static variable. I'll actually change the name to the static variable. There you go. So here we can see that it cannot access the static method or the static variable. Why? Because this is an instance of the MathUtils class, right? But the static method and the static variable are class level variables and class level methods, right? So here, instead of mu, we can directly write MathUtils, and MathUtils will be able to access the static method and the static variable, which means you do not have to create an instance of the MathUtils class in order to access these two things. They are at a class level. They are not at an object level. All right, so let's talk about a few more details. Going back to the MathUtils class. Here, this is a static variable, and this is a static method, right? This is an instance variable, and these are instance methods because they're not static. This is not static. These are static, which is why they are class level variables and class level methods. Great. Now, inside the class, any method that is an instance method, let's say we're talking about this add method here, you see any method can access the static variable. You see the static variable and the static method pop up, which means that static variables and static methods are accessible by instance methods. So the instance methods can use the static method and they can also use the static variable. Great. But do static methods behave any differently? Let's see. So inside static methods, you can access the static variable because this is static and this is also static, right? But can we access any variable here? We actually can't. You see, there's nothing called any variable here. So static methods cannot access instance variables. Can static methods access instance methods? Let's see. Let's see if we can access add. We cannot access add, which means that static methods can only access static variables, but instance methods can access instance variables and static variables. They can also access other instance methods. So add can access subtract. You see, subtract is an instance level method. Add is also an instance level method. It can access the instance variable, any variable as well, you see. But instance method can also access static variables and static methods. So you see, these two are available. However, static methods can only access static variables. So the static variable is present. What about the keyword this? This keyword here is used for the current object. Remember, whichever object you're working with, that object becomes this, right? So this means that you're interacting using an object, which means that this keyword cannot be used by a static method because static methods are class level methods. This is referring to some object that you've created somewhere, right? So static methods cannot access anything that has any relation to instances of the class. Static is a class level thing. Great. Now that we understand that, there are two more things. First, if anywhere we change the variable, the static variable's value, let's say here we give it a value of 3. Let's just say that's the value that we give it. If this gets changed anywhere, this is public, so this can be accessible anywhere through the class, right? So it doesn't matter where we are. Since this is public, we can just say mathutils dot the static variable, and we can access it because it's public. Let's say we change it to a 5. Now the mathutils, the static variable's value is 5. It's no longer 3. Okay. What that means is that for every object, this would change because the class itself changed it, right? No matter how many instances of the mathutils class you've created, the static variable will change for all those instances. So remember that you can use the static variable in the instance methods, right? So let's say you were using the value 3, but in your add method or subtract method or any other method, it doesn't matter, you were using this somehow. If it changes, then for every instance, this value changes. So this is a global class level variable because it is static. So static makes it global for all objects. If you change it once, it changes for everything. And for static methods, you can access them without creating an object, without creating an instance. You can just use the name of the class dot, and then you'll be able to access the static methods. When do we use static methods or static variables? When we want to specify something that is common to all objects of that class. So for example, if you're creating a car class, all cars have 4 wheels, right? It doesn't matter which car you're building. All cars have 4 wheels. Of course, now you can say, oh no, some cars have 3 wheels, but we're not talking about those cars. We're talking about only cars that have 4 wheels, let's say. So you can create a variable named wheels for the car class, and you can say that it's static, and you can just say that it's 4. And then instead of having it public, you can keep it private, so nobody will be able to change it. That means no matter which object you create out of the car class, every object will have a variable named wheels, and the value of the variable will always be 4. Because this is private, nobody can even access it from the outside, right? So it'll never change. So that's how you can use static. Now there are many other different scenarios, and you can have even static classes. This is a static method here, and this is a static variable. But you can even have static classes, but we won't talk about that right now. But for now, I hope you have a simple understanding of what static does.